Hello and welcome to 5.2 Lab 1. We're going to continue on with loops here. So this lab, similar to the last couple labs, has a couple parts in it. So you're going to need to open 5.2 Lab 1 JS and of course update the HTML with your student information. But in part 1, here we have a problem statement. Let me scroll down just a touch here. So we're going to write a program that asks the user to enter a number. If the number is greater than a starting variable that is set to 0, we're going to output the number and then ask the user to enter a bigger number and store it in the starting variable. As long as the newly entered number is bigger than the last one, then we're going to keep asking the user to enter a bigger number. And then we're going to display that number that's entered. Once that user puts in a number that's smaller than the last one, we're going to display the message goodbye. So it should look like this. Start off with 0, so 2, and they enter 2. 2 is bigger than 0. They enter 3, 3 is bigger than 2, 4 is bigger than 3, 6 is bigger than 4, and then 5 is, they enter 5, smaller than 6, say goodbye. So here's our planning list. So we're going to have a user num and a compare num to compare the two numbers, and that's the numbers we're going to output. We're going to prompt the user for a number, convert it to a number. We're going to assign 0 to the compare num, and then run a while loop. So as long as the user num is greater than the compare num, we're going to keep running our loop, and then within the while loop we're going to output the comparison, and then once out of the loop we're going to output the smaller comparison with the goodbye. Sorry, I misspelled that there. So with the goodbye. So our test plan is if I put 2, 5, 6, and 5, it should say 2 is bigger than 0 and so on, 5 is smaller than 6, 1, 3, 5, 2 as you see, and then 0 should say 0 is smaller than 0. So let me run this real quick here and we'll see input a number. I'll say 2, input number 4, input number 6, and then I'll put number 5, and it's done. And it should say 2 is bigger than 0, 4 bigger than 2, and then eventually 5 is smaller than 6, goodbye. So let's look and see how I did this. So again, I have my user num and my compare num, and I'm prompting the end user for a number, converting it, and I'm setting compare num to 0. And then as long as the user num is greater than the compare num, my while loop's going to keep running. So my document write is I'm going to say user num is bigger than compare num, and so I prompt them first, and then I'm prompting them again. So I'm prompting them on line 13 to enter a number, and then I'm going to output that it's bigger than the compare num, and I'm going to set the compare num equal to the user num, and then I'm going to prompt them again. User num is equal to prompt, keep going, enter a bigger number. And then I'm going to keep doing a comparison. One thing I forgot to do in here that I probably should put in here is I should, even though we're not doing really math with it, we're doing a comparison, and it's converting it to data type integer for us in the interpreter, I still should do the number user num here. And then let's rerun it just to make sure. So 2, 4, 3 this time. And there it works. So that's an example of how we use a while loop, interact with the end user to have them provide information and make decisions based off of what they enter. So that's part 1. Let me skim down to part 2 and get it set up here. And we'll jump back into here and see what we have to do. So for part 2, we're going to interact with the employee payroll record set. Open that in a new tab here. So we're going to write a program that accesses the employee payroll record set. We're going to determine the average, maximum, and minimum hourly wage for employees and output the result like this. Average hourly, 22.29, 30, 15. Now, whenever you're interacting with record sets and doing logic and stuff like this, just like you could interchange while and for loops, you could do this in several ways, just because you may do it differently than what I'm doing it. And there's pros and cons maybe to each one of our methods. So I'm going to show you the way I'm doing it. Feel free to make some adjustments and do it the way you want to do it. As long as you're following the coding standards, that's fine. So here's what I'm going to do. In my planning list, I have an average, min, max, and min wage variable, current wage variable, the payroll records, the counter, and my total wage. I'm going to be outputting only the average, max, and min. The other variables I'm going to use to keep track of where I'm at and do my calculation. So I'm going to access the employee payroll record set with the employee payroll records. access the wage info with get employee payroll hourly wage, and then run a while loop with that read next record method. I'm going to set max wage to 0, min wage to 0, average wage to 0 to start with, set the counter to 1, and set the current wage equal to the employee's wage within the record set. Then within my loop, I'm going to run an if statement to see if the current wage is greater than the maximum wage value and store accordingly, and create an if statement for the min wage also, and then run an else if statement to see if the current wage is less than the min wage value and store that accordingly. And then I'm going to compound, add that to the total wage, divide average wage by the counter, increment that counter, and output the results. So I'm expecting, just like you see there, 22, 29, 30, and 15. Now let's look at the record set. We've got, in our record set, we've got employee number, name, hourly wage, and hours worked. Same thing, where it's got a constructor in it. We're going to use employee payroll records to open it. And then we have some methods based on the prototype, read next record, get employee hourly wage, things like that. So if I go back and look at the data, let me find it here. There we go, employee payroll records class. So here are my employee records. Employee number, name, hourly wage, hours worked. So we have hourly wage, like Joe here is making $15 an hour, Fred's making $20, and Ethel's making $25. And same thing, this dot position variable to keep track of where we're at. Down at the bottom I have the employee payroll records read next record that again sees if this dot position variable, if it's greater than the, or equal to the length, it'll return false, so it's going to be true, so we're going to be using a while loop there. We got the open employee records, which is going to open that constructor for us. And then we have the various methods, class level methods, such as, oops, I passed it up. Let's go back down. Go into employee payroll records constructor at the class level, get our hourly wage, which is just going to use this dot position, and in this case the position 2, which is the third position, to bring back the wage as we're going through. So here's how I did it. I've got my variables. Now here's a distinction you may not have seen before. Before we've had all our variables on separate lines, such as up here, var use num, var compare num. I'm just showing you an alternative way. There's pros and cons to do it this way. Some people like it this way, some people don't, and there's standards discussions on whether it's like this way. But you may come across this in JavaScript where I'm just declaring all my variables with one var, average, max, min, payroll, counter, current, total, all there in one line. So you can do that. My assignment section here, average wage, max, min, all set to 0, counter set to 1, total to 0. And in payroll records, I'm opening that constructor box and grabbing in payroll records with open employee payroll records. So then I can call the read next record method on my payroll records variable. So inside here, excuse me, I'm going to set my current wage equal to payroll records.get employee hourly wage. So as we're looping through, I'm grabbing that Joe's $15 an hour, Fred's $20 an hour, and so forth. And then I'm going to say, okay, is their current wage greater than maximum wage? Well, initially when this goes through, yes, because my max wage is set to 0. So it's going to be more than that. So, pardon me, Joe's $15 is going to be greater than that. So I'm going to set max wage equal to current wage. So the next time it goes through, if we look back on our data, let me scroll back up here. Oops, scroll too far. The current wage is going to be 20, and that's going to be greater than 15, so the max wage will be set to 20. And next time it's going to be 25, and then 30. It will not set that on this one because Barney makes $30, Wilma makes 20. And then I do something similar to min wage, but I got to do this one a little differently. And the reason why is because I set my min wage to 0, and if I just do a simple comparison like I did here, it will never increase above 0, and no one is going to work for you for free. So this is the way I did it using 0. I could have also done it similar to this one, but I would have had to set my minimum wage at some huge amount, like, you know, $10,000 an hour or whatever, so that I know that I will never hit that amount. In this case, I'm saying, okay, if my minimum wage is equal to 0, I know it has not been set. So I set minimum wage equal to current wage. Then I'm doing an else if, because once that's been set, I know my minimum wage is not 0. So now I'm saying if my current wage is less than my minimum wage, then I'm going to set my minimum wage equal to my current wage. Then I'm taking the current wage and just compound adding it in my total wage. So I'm adding up all my wages. 15 plus 20, 35, plus 25 is 60, plus 30 is 90. I'm adding all that up, and I'm incrementing my counter. So I'm getting what my total wages per hour are across all my employees. And that allows me to do this average calculation of take my average wage and set it equal to total wage, so whatever that total comes out to be, divided by my counter, which should be my number of employees, which should give me my average hourly wage. And then, if you notice, I'm just doing a 2 fix because that calculation comes out to more than 2 decimals. So I'm just doing a 2 fix there since we're working with money. And then outputting my max and min wage, which comes out to look like this: 22, 29, 30, and 15. Hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, let me know, and happy coding.